Rider with you.
Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Color Swap Pack. Now, as you can see here, we have a female Mighty Morphin Red and a male Mighty Morphin Yellow, as this is based off of the Go-Go Power Rangers comic arc where the Rangers swapped Ranger colors. It was these two to start. Trini and Jason were the focus of this arc. Later, at the end of the arc, everyone color swapped. I believe it was Billy as the Black Ranger, Kim as the Blue Ranger, and Zach as the Pink Ranger. So we very well could be in for more of these figures. I liked the idea of doing this because even though it's a fairly easy, like, oh my god, more MMPR, really basic type of thing, it's from the comic, it's a cool idea. It also kind of can give you like a, hey, what if the MMPR Red Ranger was female type of figure? And it's also funny because, you know, in Jew Ranger, the Yellow Ranger started out as a guy and we made it a girl. So there's kind of fun stuff about this set, but it wound up being kind of a mixed bag, in my opinion. But let's go ahead and get started with the accessories. Both of them come with just two sets of hands, the ones that you have on them, which you can see are used for holding their weapons, and then they both have closed fists. There's the guy's one, and then the girl's one's right here. For whatever reason, the other fist of hers fell somewhere, and I can't find it, but it's not, like, crucial to this review. Both come with, like, all the versions of the Blade Blaster, as you can see right here, so that's kind of neat, and you know, they're all painted for what exactly it needs to be. Here are Yellow's lightning accessories you can see to put on the tips of the daggers. Here is Red standard lightning apart, and obviously you have their power weapons, the power sword for the Red Ranger, and the power daggers for the Yellow Ranger, which are like, you know, they're fine. Honestly, they have a decent amount of paint. There could maybe be a little more detail on this, but it's not a huge deal breaker. They're overall decent for what they are. My only real, not complaint, well, I guess note, is that these are way more rubbery and flimsy than I remember the power daggers being, and it was kind of hard to get them in the fists. Likewise, for this one, that has nothing to do with the weapon, but I thought about it while I was, well, thinking about it, is that it feels like the female mold hands just aren't meant to hold this weapon. Oh, that's a that's what she said joke. But, like, it was really difficult to actually get this one in here. Like, I had to pry the fingers open, and even then it's kind of an awkward fit. So it's like clear they just didn't think about it so much when reusing the assets, which is something I'll get into. They also both include civilian heads, which are kind of weird because, as I mentioned, these are from the comic, so they sort of try to adapt a little bit of the comic aesthetic with more of a human head, where this one just looks like they just cut Trini's hair and it looks more live action-y. This one's okay. I do just wish they had a cartoon comic-y look to them, but this one's alright, but Jason's is, well, let's just show you. Here is Jason's, which honestly scares me to death. I'm having a hard time not running away from this review right now. Like, it looks like either Jason and Bulk, like, did the fusion dance, or they took Flabber's makeup off. Like, it scares me. It's weird because, again, they're sort of trying to make his hairstyle a little bit like Jason's from the comic, but they're using more of an ASJ look, and it just doesn't look right. And I'm very disappointed in these head sculpts. I've gone on ad nauseum in past Lightning reviews how I just want comic, cartoony looking head sculpts because I think not only would it be something different, but I see the comic versions as completely different characters. I don't associate the comic characters with ASJ and with Trini, like as the live action counterparts. So I want them to look more like the comic and not this weird thing. And I think that's really disappointing that they look so strange, especially Jason's. I appreciate that they almost tried to look his hair look the same, but it's weird. I think they're very weird looking. But let's talk about the figures themselves. Let's start with the Red Ranger here. Overall, these figures are mostly fine. You know, they're of the same general quality you usually get, mostly solid, same articulation, but there is some odd notes to them. I mean, first of all, again, like I just mentioned, the same articulation you always get. You have the hinge joint at the waist, ball joint at the chest, you have a ball joint at the head, you have your hinge here, ball joint at the arm, elbow joint here, swiveling at the arm, swiveling at the fist. You have the ball joint and the swiveling at the leg, knee joint, and then the little ball hinge joint here at the foot. All pretty much the same as per usual. And, you know, this was clearly like a very easy set of figures for them to do because all they had to do was take the female mold and the male mold of MMPR and then just swap the helmets, and that's all they really did. There's not really too much difference about them, which is easy to see why they did that. It's a slam dunk. It's MMPR. It's easy to do. They already have all the assets. That's fine. But at the same time, I'm a little disappointed because I think these could have been something more. I think for this one, it's not so bad, but definitely the helmet looks a little bit too big for her head. Like, it's different when you see it in the comic because obviously it can look different panel to panel. They can stylize the helmet to be a little bit thinner to proportion with the body, but this definitely looks a little bit too big for her head, or for her body, excuse me, and it's a little bit off-putting. It's not necessarily a huge deal breaker, but I wish it was a little bit different. It is worth noting, at least, they are using the improved MMPR red head sculpt, so I think you could probably swap it out out on the regular body if you wanted to, which is nice. I'll put up a little picture of what, if you remember, the original MMPR red head sculpt looks like, which is very inaccurate. So that's kind of nice to have that. But like I said, the head sculpt, just I wish it was more in proportion with the body. I'm going to have a little end rant about that, about talking about the comic book style of that, but that was my main note about this. Also, something worth noting, and unless I'm misremembering this, as you can see right here, you can see the painted on design of the Tyrannosaurus coin. If I remember right, this is such a nerdy, pathetic nitpick, but if you remember in the comic, they still had their regular power coins because the reason their power swapped was from like a weird frequency change or something. So she still had the Sabertooth coin in her Morpher. That's not a huge deal. That's something that like I can see people really acting like is important. And for me, it's not a huge deal. Like on the shelf, I'm not going to notice it from far away. No big deal, whatever. But I will say it would have been cool if they would have remembered that detail. Now, before I move on to yellow, there is something worth noting about both of these guys, is that, obviously they can swap heads. I found it extraordinarily difficult, or at least more so than usual, to swap the heads and get the Ranger helmets on for these. Like, obviously, the human heads were already on there, so they kind of went on easy, but these ones were both exceptionally difficult to get to click on there. Like, you'll have hit and miss with that when you have head swappable figures. Sometimes it'll be a little more difficult, sometimes not. But these were Chronicles of ridiculous. It was nuts. Like, I had to put so much pressure on this. This figure here was a little bit loose. It wasn't terribly loose, but it was loose in some parts. But because I was having to hold it down here so much, I slipped once, and now this part is really loose. So I don't know if that's an issue anyone else is having, but that is definitely worth noting how difficult it was to get the head sculpts on, and as a result, it made some of the loose parts more loose as it was. Same articulation for this guy overall. I kind of have a sort of similar issue, but in reverse with this as I have with red, is I feel the helmet looks a little too small for the body, and the body seems a little bit too bulky. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. Like, seeing some of the promo images, it looked like, oh, this looks just way too bulky. Like, it just looks strange. And it doesn't look as bad in person, especially in certain angles, but there's definitely a proportion issue, and it makes me wish they would have stylized them more. Like, again, I know that it's so much easier and cheaper to just, okay, yeah, we can just swap the assets and recolor, no big deal. But it would have been so cool to actually get a set that had not only the cartoon looking heads, but maybe do stylized figures that look like they come from the comic. And I know that would be creating new molds, but you could easily reuse those for other things, such as the 1969 Rangers. Like, if you were to make a cartoon stylized MMPR helmet for red that's a girl, you could release Grace later on. And likewise with this one, you could do a re-release with a comic figure of the 1969 Yellow Ranger and include their cartoon heads. And then you can still get use out of making a new mold rather than these ones, which are okay at best, but they come off as very awkward, in my opinion, because it's just so simply done, especially with swapping out the helmets, which leads to some, like, ill proportions. Now, as far as comparisons go, the one I did want to compare it to for yellow is the figure art right here, because this is an interesting case, because, again, as you know, in G-Ranger, the Yellow Ranger there was male, we made it female, and then now we have this color swap arc. So there was actually a male Yellow Ranger figure made for Sentai as actually the main release. We actually had a special female yellow release, and this one actually holds up pretty decently. I still think the old figure art molds are really skinny and kind of awkward, but this one actually isn't too bad, and the helmet sculpt is a little skinnier, but it's overall pretty solid. I would say a more quote-unquote perfect proportion for this male body, the ideal male body, would be like right between these two in regards to just proportions. This one's maybe just a smidge skinnier, although not for the Sentai footage. This one's actually pretty in line with the Tiger Ranger Sentai footage. But just thinking about what it looks like in the comic and just kind of a more like in the middle type of deal, I think the proportions would work better as something in between the bulk of the Lightning collection and the skinniness of the figure art. Overall, this set is a mixed bag for me though. I was like actually kind of looking forward to the idea of this, again, because I do like the comics and I like getting things from it, and I like the idea of having kind of the alternate, like, gender swapped versions of the MMPR Rangers. But they wound up being really basic figures with a lot of problems. Like, I think they just look kind of awkward with the ill proportions. I think the head sculpts are really awkward. Again, this might just be exclusive to mine or maybe exclusive to a handful, but the helmet swapping was really annoying, and I hate that it kind of ruined my Yellow Ranger figure a bit. So at the end of the day, this isn't the worst thing they've ever released, but I would say for me personally, I can't recommend it unless you're really interested in it and you find it on sale. Like, if you just really like the idea of this and you want it, just wait for a sale. I think it probably will go on it. Then I can recommend it. Again, it's not the worst thing, but I just can't recommend it as is at the current price. But that's about it for this one, guys. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can get notifications for my videos. Awesome Rider, signing out.